Give you a word of caution today. Caution. Benevolent dictator turned to horror. I see currently a rise in a trend towards communal living and removing ourselves from the toxic society that exists to join utopian and idyllic small micro communities. Myself, I was born in the late 60s to early 70s. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. You can probably figure it out. I was born into one of these small cult communities that was birthed out of the fear in response to the civil unrest at the time, when the baby boomers in their 20s were rebelling and exerting pressure to deconstruct their society in the United States and reconstruct it in a more equitable way. However, my experience in that commune provides a word of caution. Democracy, with checks and balances in the governance of these new micro-communities, and personally, in all of our relations, is required to safeguard against the addictive influence of power that turns a benevolent dictator into a worshipped monster, and to ensure that equanimity and do no harm is experienced and provided for everyone affected by the actions of the group. As I mentioned, I grew up in a communal cult that separated itself into a microsystem like this in the 60s to 70s. And I was the leader when we first started was a benevolent dictator who started out with helpful intentions, but then succumbed to the addictive drug of power and ended up doing horrific things to its member, and sadly, especially to us children. I strongly caution against showing any interest in groups that do not distribute power to their governance to what I think the best system is, a rotating assignment of power position, allowing all competent members to participate in serving in these positions by assuming one of the multiple roles of leaderships, and each of these roles provide checks and balances similar to the three-pronged governance system that we have here in the United States. If this rotating system doesn't work, then second to that, a democracy where everyone gets an equal vote and influence over the outcome. And the influence over the outcome isn't so heavy that one individual or a small group of individuals have the unbalanced or undue influence in the popularity contest rising up to the elections and are able to manufacture consent. They do this by creating and enforcing a groupthink and bubble realities that keeps the power stagnant under the control of this individual or a small group of hands. This is very dangerous. This destroys democracy when power is concentrated in a small group of hands, and undue influence is in a small group that allows them to manufacture consent through groupthink and bubble reality. I've witnessed a few of my cherished groups in Portland, Oregon, which is my space of origin. I lived for most of my life. Right now I'm living in New York, on Long Island, and in the dorm hospital of a hospital just outside of New York City on Long Island, where my wife is serving a medical residency. These are interesting times for us here. And I've witnessed in Portland the destruction of a few groups that previously had been set up with decentralized power, and they experienced the migration from decentralized powers with checks and balances to a benevolent dictatorship, especially in groups I've seen when the dictator that took over doesn't have the emotional intelligence and is unable to effectively lead. Because of early complex trauma that I received in my group as a child being raised in the cult community, I did a lot of work in my life through my 20s and 30s and 40s, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, to study how to heal myself from the trauma and damage that was done to me. And also, I was very curious and did a lot of work studying in governance and governance systems what works well to safeguard against the trappings of a dictator. It is important that we guard against these systems of dictatorship in our own formations of power, as well as with our struggle of opposing formations of power. Opposite groups are going to be forming and rushing into the void that this darkness and deconstruction period is creating. We will need for everyone in our communities to be vigilant and actively work to prevent this from happening. The consequences of allowing a benevolent dictator to succumb to the addiction of power can be severe, as we've seen in history past. Some of the most horrific benevolent dictators, such as Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Saddam Hussein, I could go on and on and on, are very much still in our memory. We know what happened and the mass atrocities that happened under their rule. Many of them started out as being helpful and a benevolent dictator, and they were dictators. That is the key. The power wasn't distributed. I'm happy to share my experiences and insights. My name is Troy Person, so I'm happy to share things I've experienced, what I've learned, my insights and understandings that I've gained to any person or group that desires it, especially to anyone or any group who is currently worried about or currently entrapped by this seductive, addicted trap of being in a group led by a benevolent dictator, or maybe now not so benevolent. Feel free to share this video with everybody, and feel free to reach out to me, Troy Person, and ask me questions if you like. I'm posting this on Facebook, so if you find it on Facebook, you can reach out to me and private message me there, or if you find it somewhere else, you can email me at thperson@gmail.com. Thank you, and be well.